Hello and good morning, friends. Today we are going to continue with our discussion on the Marxist theory of rise of state. So in previous class we learned how Marx stated the whole theory and the Marx said about the various stages of human history. So now that was the introduction about Marx and his ideas. Now we are going to get into the core of this theory in reality. So what Marx says about rise of the state is something that we are going to learn today. So Marx says that the state came to rise to exercise power over the slaves. This is not a just institution. Since the people, the owners of the slave, first in the primitive communism, everyone was equal. Then there was slave society when people owned property and then they started keeping slaves to work on that property. So Marx is saying that state came to power only to exercise the power over those slaves because the owners were in a minority. There were fewer owners and there were a lot of slaves. So the owners, since they were in the minority, they were afraid of their position, that anytime there could be an overthrow. So they started to act through the state, and then they created police, they created jails, they created laws only to exploit the slaves. Marx says that the basic reason, the basic aim of the state at that time, since the state was in its earliest form, was only to exploit the slaves. Then in the next days, in the feudal times, feudal lord kept control over his serf. Now the position of the owners has been taken by the feudal lord, and the position of the slaves has been taken over by the serfs. They are the same thing. The economic order is still same. The feudal lord keeping control over his slaves to keep himself economically strong and dominant. And since he was being dominant at that time, he was using state to his own advantage. Then in the third stage, the capitalist state. Now this is the state this is the stage where the state has come to its full grown developed position. Now Marx says that the real development of the state took place here. Machines took place of man. Since there was industrialization, there were factories, there were people who were working in those factories, and then there come machinization. Machines took place of man. Machine could do the same work faster and more economically, more cheaper. So machines took place of man, and since profit maximizing was and still is the prime aim of the capitalist, the owners only want profit. They do not care about anything else. Simple as that. If someone is dying, it's dying. They just do not care. Only they want is profit. So their prime aim was profit maximization. So now when they are employing machines instead of humans, instead of man, the man will start go unemployed and their hardship will increase. And now in order to maximize their profit, they started to exploit the workers even more and more. To keep the control over the workers, the capitalist developed state into a strong state. They started to fund the state, they started to help the state in maintaining its law and order, and the state in return started to keep control over the workers, over the majority of the population, and started to work in the favor of the capitalist class or the rich class. Okay, now the views of this theory is this. First is this, that the state is a product of struggle. Marx says that the state is not a good institution, it's not a good thing. It is born out of struggle. What struggle? So Marx goes on to say that where, when, and to what extent the state arises depends directly on when, where, and to what extent the class struggle is present. So in order for state to become something, it is necessary for two classes to have struggle. And this is what Marx is saying, that wherever there is a struggle between two classes, between a rich class and between a poor class, the rich class will invent state in order to protect itself. So what extent the state arises, this directly depends on to what extent the class struggle is present. Second, the state always supports the exploiters. This is one of the more clearer things about this theory. Marx says that the state always supports the exploiter. It is always support the rich class. It does not care about the poor class. It will make laws, but even all those laws are made only for the benefit of the rich class. Third is the state bases power. He suggests that only power can end the state. He says that it is not the will of the people, because people do not even know about their real will. They are being brainwashed sometimes. And he says that since power is the base of the state, only power can end the state, because only power can end power. More power can end less power. Fourth is opposite to public welfare. Marx says that state shows that it is working for the people, but in reality it is not. It is not working for the welfare of the people. These are lies. State lies to the poor people. He says that state only shows, it is a hypocritic institution. It only shows that it is working for the people, but in reality it only supports the capitalist. It only works for the rich class, only the bourgeoisie class. State is only miserable. State has always been and will be. This means that state is not something that is good for people. It is not a merry thing. It is not a welfare institution. Marx says the state is a bad thing. It was bad, it always has been bad, and it will always be bad for the poor people. This is what Marx says. Now there are a few criticism points as well to end this theory. Criticism is state is a growth but not to make. It's a slow developmental process. This is quite clear now, that state is not something that was born in one process. It is simple slow developmental process. Of course economic functions, economic factors were there, but there were other factors as well. As we learned the goat's view, the people having the view of the goat. We also learned about how simply and slowly the power concept arises, and economic concept is also there, but it's a growth. It is not one time thing. Second is too much importance on economic factors. The critics alleges that Marx only looks at one point. He's only looking at economic factors. We cannot completely disregard his theory, but he's only mentioning economic factors. But there are other factors too. There are cultural factors, there are religious factors, there are intellectual factors. But Marx only gives importance to one thing only. Too much detrimental effects on economic factors. Third is will not force is the basic of the state. It's quite clear today that maybe in past there may have been some times when force was the base in the primitive times, but today might is not always right. It is the law, it is the will of the people. They want to follow the law, that's why the law is being followed. 4 is rise of the welfare state. Even though Marx says that the state only works for the rich people, this is clear that there are a lot of schemes that the state runs in for the benefit of the poor people, like the PDS scheme, where the BPL families get ration for almost very negligible prices, and there is midday meal scheme for nutrition of the children. There are other schemes like unemployment allowances, there are old age pension schemes. So there the state, none of the state is now completely socialist, not completely capitalist. They are welfare state now. The welfarism has become quite a concept. Fifth is utopian imagination of withering away of the state. So Marx said that since the state is not very good, it's a bad thing. It is partition, it always helps the rich, and the rich exploits the poor. And at one time when this exploitation will get to the rich, the poor will get together, they will take up arms, and there will be violent overthrow. And with the overthrow of the capitalist class, the state will come to an end too, and there will be no government, there will be no state, and everyone will start living equally. But now this is quite clear after so many years, and even there was this violent revolution in Russia in 1917. But today, been more than 100 years since the Russian Revolution, the state is still there. Only state has become stronger. In China, that China says that it's a communist country, but it is not communist either, because in communism the power is in the hands of the people. But in China the power is not in the hands of the people. The power is in the hands of the Communist Party of China. Everything that is controlled by few people. So it is not a communist state, it is an oligarchy, power in the few hands. And Russia is also not a communist state. Cuba is also not a communist state. They are not actually communist. They are not actually doing according to the theory of Marx. Plus, Marx's utopian imagination that one day state will come to an end has also failed. So that is also a criticism, that his prophecy that one day workers will end the state has completely bear no fruit. It has failed completely, because there is state, and only the concept of state is becoming stronger and stronger every day. So this was the theory, the Marxist theory of origin of state. I hope you learned something from this. This was quite interesting. This was different than other theories, and I will see you in the next class. Thank you. Bye bye.